So back to the crisis in Ukraine that we've been talking about, and we've been giving you updates. And video has surfaced of hospital workers trying to desperately revive a 6-year-old girl after an attack.
Yeah, here it is right here. Here's part of it. They're giving the poor child CPR, 6 years old, a girl, her mother standing by the back of the ambulance in just desperation. And so they videotaped the whole thing, and one of the doctors, when they're giving this little girl CPR, trying to save her life, looks into the camera and says, "Show this footage to Putin. This is the result of when you invade another country and start a war." So this video has been seen all over the world, and you know that kids somehow have seen this on their iPads or maybe even their television screens. And certainly their phones, the kids that have phones. Front page of today's paper, Philadelphia Inquirer, above the fold. Babies being born. They're in a bomb shelter in Ukraine. So all these images bombarding all of us, including our children.
So we already know it's difficult for so many people because so many people have been talking about this, but our kids, they're dealing with this too. So we want to bring in Darcy Walker Krause, who's joining us this morning. You're the executive director of the Uplift Center for Grieving Children, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
You all know all too well about grieving, losing a parent. When did you lose your mom?
When I was 15.
15.
My mom died,
What happened?
She had a heart attack, so
Oh
it was
my
sudden.
God.
Yeah.
You were in high school?
I was in high school, sophomore year. Yeah.
So did you go see a therapist about it, or did you just take it internally?
I did. I had a teacher who helped me find a therapist to go see, and honestly, I think that made all the difference for me.
Yeah.
Just to feel that there was I learned coping skills, to be able to process the grief and talk about it. That was really helpful.
Well, you know, a lot of people are children. How old are your kids?
I have a 7, 9, and 11-year-old.
Oh, God help you. You know, kids are seeing these images.
Yes.
It's hard to hide. And a lot of them won't try to get help. They won't know to ask for help.
Yeah.
So they'll just internalize this, won't they?
They might. I mean, I always recommend in these kind of situations to really limit media coverage if at all possible. But that's the best case scenario. Mm-hmm. We know that kids are going to see these images, and so it's really important, I think, just to really engage the conversation, to talk to your kids and just say, have you been seeing about the war in Ukraine? Have you seen anything that's been upsetting? If your kids are on social media, make sure that you ask them about it. I see it on my social media feeds.
Don't wait for them to mention it.
No.
Go to them and ask them.
Go and ask them. Say, I know I see it up and down my feed. What have you been seeing? How does that make you feel? Just asking them to engage and talk and process about how they're feeling about it, seeing that.
And then what do you tell them? 'Cause a lot of times kids, they look for advice, like, Mom, is this really going to be a war? Are we going to be affected by this? How do you handle that? How much do you tell them, and how honest should you be with them?
It depends on the age. The younger they are, I would withhold a bit more.
Let's go with yours. 7?
So 7-year-old, we actually talk to them all 3 because they're all kind of together. So when you have that kind of group, so we ask them what they've seen. We tell them a little bit about the reasons for the war, what's happening, that it's over there, that we're safe. One of my kids asked if we're going to have a draft because they know a little bit about Vietnam.
Interesting.
So we talked about the professionalization of our military here in the United States and how that is something that has changed over the years since that time. They were asking my husband if this were to happen, would he be drafted? I mean, there are a lot of questions, particularly over in Ukraine. All men 55 and under have to fight and stay. So that's definitely something that, I think you can, but just assuring them that this is not here, this is far away. We're not entering this war yet, if at all, and just trying to make sure that they understand that.
But the threat of it, and I think in the talks, especially with the news that Newton put was on high alert when it comes to some of the nuclear responses, and the folks have been talking about potential nuclear war, and those are some strong words for kids to hear.
Yes, definitely.
Do you explain that and the history of that, or is that something you say this is not something to worry about just yet?
I personally would say it's not something to worry about just yet. It's pretty complex to go into the nuance of that. Yeah,
but you wonder because if they're hearing it so much, because I feel like I see that being talked about a lot. If that's something you kind of have to, because people are bringing it up.
Yeah, yeah. I think just you can talk about it and say that's not something that's probably going to happen. That this is what I explained to my own daughter. Actually, is I said, this is this is just kind of Putin trying to threaten other countries, really
Right.
just trying to raise the alert and the
Brr.
scare other
I
countries.
feel for kids, man. They got a pandemic for 2 years. You got all the gun violence we talk about every day on this show. And now you're throwing in a war, and people keep saying it could be World War III. That's got to scare you, too. You know,
Yeah.
it's the biggest invasion since World War II.
Absolutely. Well, really, you mentioned the gun violence, Mike. I mean, that's one of the things that I've actually been talking to folks about is that our kids are in the community are hearing gunshots. They're hearing a lot of this, and I think that it's really important, particularly around media. They may now hear some of these sounds that could actually trigger things they've heard before. And so just keeping that in mind and making sure limiting maybe volume or turning off the volume maybe during certain segments and things like that, just to recognize that real world things could actually trickle into this as you're processing it and thinking about it.
Darcy, thank you.
Thank you for having me today.
We'll have to have you back, because, well, hopefully it'll end soon. We'll come right back.